There are some experiences that you will never forget. There are some images that will be burned upon your heart for a lifetime. A black man killed by a white man. The streets of America being filled with peaceful protesters about this horrific act. Some of the protests turning into violent riots, America burning. The sense of grief, the sadness, the sorrow about this horrific act of violence against one man. And then the grief about the larger violence expanding even beyond that. The anger, the righteous indignation that says this simply should not be. These are the memories, these are the images that were etched on my soul in 1968. I was 14 years old. Martin Luther King had just been killed. It was the first time that I really was gripped by this horrific discrimination and prejudice within our country. My background was I was being raised in deep South Texas. I lived in Rio Grande City for several years and then Pharr for several years. And in deep South Texas, probably then even more than now, there's a very large Hispanic majority there. And the Anglo-American population was the minority, and I was very much the minority, and I was the very pale skin and the blonde-haired boy. I was a minority, but my entire experience, the entire run, was that those in the majority just completely, fully accepted me. I don't have a single recollection of a time when anyone in that great majority ever treated me as other than. Not a single time that I felt I was excluded or looked down upon. And so that was my experience of 14 years in 1968. And then to see this horrific act of violence and understand that it wasn't a one-time standalone act, and to recognize the discrimination, recognize the prejudices acted out, and the damage done was deeply, deeply disturbing. So these past 2 weeks, you can imagine all of those memories coming back from 52 years ago. A black man killed by a white man, innocent protests in the streets, some spilling into violence and riots in America, burning once again. I've had some days of such discouragement. I've been asking myself the question, has nothing changed? In those 52 years from the first memory to now, has nothing changed? I was sitting down with Kevin, a dear friend of mine. Kevin happens to be a black man. And we were talking, and I posed the question to him in my discouragement. I said, you haven't lived nearly as long as I have. But in your experience as a black man in America, in your years, have you seen change occur? And Kevin thought for a long time, and he said, I have. It's been incremental. It's been merely incremental, but I have seen change in my lifetime. And it gave me this fresh hope out of my despair, and it caused me to think back over my much longer lifetime, and it caused me to realize that there has been change. I think about neighborhoods now. I think about the businesses I know now. I think about the churches, including this one I know now. There has been change, but it's been merely incremental. But in these recent days, there's a hope that's been rising up within me, that this time might be different. This time when we look back upon it, we may not say there was change, but it was merely incremental. There's this hope rising in me that this time we might look back and say there's been substantial change that's happened in this time. And so during this teaching, I'm going to challenge you to a 21-day challenge, because the question is, what is the role that we as followers of Jesus play? What is the role of Jesus Church? So I'll be challenging you to a 21-day challenge, some things to do for 21 days. And 21 days from now on this stage, our dear friend Ricky Baldwin will be here. as he's been every summer for many, many years now. If you're watching this and new to the harbor, you don't know who Ricky is perhaps, but he's a black man that started in the NFL. He left his career at the peak in the NFL to follow a calling of God to be a pastor. He's pastored churches. Now he has multiple ministries in Washington, D.C., some in the halls of Congress, some in the inner city working with teenagers. But he's coming back. Marie and I were his and his wife Linda's guest, along with a couple others in D.C. last year, and got to spend some time with him there. And at one point, Ricky looked at me and said, you know the harbor is my second home. And those of you that have been here for a number of years now, you know that Ricky is one of us. 21 days, he's going to be here on the stage. The subject will be racial reconciliation. So I'm going to teach today and challenge you to these next 21 days. There are a couple of foundational things that we have to lay out. These things matter much to where we're going. The first is this, is that every person is created in the image of God. No exception, every person is created in the image of God. In Genesis 1:27, it says, so God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. He was speaking, first of all, to Adam and Eve, but we were all the descendants of Adam and Eve. Every single person you ever encounter has been created in the very image of God. And I'll take it a step beyond that. In Psalm 139, the psalmist is realizing how God has made him. There's a point where he says, I have been fearfully and wonderfully made. He's recognizing that he is God's masterpiece. And that same thing is true of every single person God makes, fearfully and wonderfully made. I can imagine in heaven with every single life that God creates, I can imagine the angels standing around and saying, wow, God, you did it again. You did it again. Another one created in your image, another one fearfully and wonderfully made. The second foundational thing is this, is that there are two essentials for a just and civil society. There are two essentials for a just and civil society. The first is this, is hearts in alignment with God's heart. Hearts in alignment with God's heart. This is the key. This is when a society thrives. It means that someone's heart would match God's heart. It means someone with that kind of heart wouldn't have to be told and mandated not to steal. They just simply wouldn't steal. It wouldn't have to be illegal and punishable to murder. They just simply would not murder. It wouldn't have to be illegal to discriminate against or be prejudiced against. They just simply would not do that. When a heart is aligned with the heart of God, then that's simply how someone lives. This is the key to a society thriving. When you have this growing majority, when you have a great majority of people whose hearts are aligned with the heart of God, then you have a society that thrives in every area. But there are always some whose heart are not aligned with God's. So the second essential is there. A legal and judicial system that protects the innocent. A legal and judicial system that protects the innocent. There have to be laws and penalties for stealing. Have to be laws and penalties against murdering. Have to be laws and penalties against damaging the innocent by discrimination and by acting in prejudice for them. There have to be laws. But you and I need to understand that a law is merely mandating that someone act against their will if their heart is not in alignment with the heart of God. It's this mandate that they must act against their will. They must not do what they otherwise would do. And if they act against these mandates, then if they do what's been mandated not to do, there'll be punishment. So we've had our entire nation's history laws against stealing. We've tried to refine and improve upon those, and yet people still steal. We've had laws against murder. We've tried to refine those and refine the penalties to decrease murder, yet people still murder. You and I have to realize if we finally ever perfected the laws against discrimination and prejudice harming the innocent, if we ever perfected them, there would still be some who would go against the laws and would break those laws. We have to understand that. We have to understand that. We have to have a legal and judicial system that protects the innocent. But the win, what trumps all of that is having hearts that are in alignment with the heart of God. So I want to give you 4 steps for all Christ followers. And so I give you these 4. I don't mean to suggest that God won't direct you or me to do other things as well. God may well direct you to do some things he would not me, and vice versa as well. But these are 4 things for all Christ followers. And so I would encourage all of you at the Harbor, I would encourage you to embrace these for 21 days. And if you're not at the Harbor, but you're joining in, if you're not even a Christ follower, I would encourage you to embrace these 4 steps for 21 days. The first step is this, is to go deep. By that I mean examine your own heart. Go deep within your own heart and examine if there's still discrimination and prejudice in your own heart. I dare not say too quickly that there's none in mine, and nor should you. Discrimination and prejudice hide very well. We're so often blind to our own discrimination, our own prejudice toward others. 1 Samuel 16:7 says, "The Lord doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by outward appearances, but the Lord looks at the heart." This is how God sees people. He looks beyond the exterior. He looks at the heart. The question is, do I look at the heart for people? Do I look for the heart in people? Or do I stop at the surface? Do I stop at the color of skin, the socioeconomic, the way one dresses, the accent they may have? Do I stop with the surface, or do I look to the heart as God looks to the very heart? Questions I find helpful are do I make assumptions about someone because of their skin color, or their socioeconomic status, or their education, or their status? The list could go on. Do I make assumptions about them, or do I withhold all assumptions and try to see their heart, try to learn their heart? I've learned it helps to ask, what jokes do I laugh at? Do I find, with retrospect, I laugh at jokes that categorize people and groups of people in a prejudicial way? I found it helps to ask, am I equally comfortable with someone of any skin color, any socioeconomic background, any accent, any education or lack thereof? Am I equally comfortable with someone living next door to me? Or someone at the desk at work next door to mine? Or someone in the seat at the church next to mine, even when that seat is no longer 6 to 8 feet apart, when that seat is right up against your seat? Am I equally comfortable? This is a place where David says in Psalm 139, verses 23 and 24, he says, "Search me, Lord, and know my heart. Point out anything in me that offends you." I was visiting a few days ago with Kim, who's a dear friend of mine for many years, and Kim happens to be black, and we were talking about what's happening now, and Kim said, "Rick, don't forget that prejudice goes in all directions." He said there are white people prejudiced against black people. There are black people prejudiced against white people. He said there are black people prejudiced against black people. As an illustration, he said, I've done work with a company out of Africa, Black Africa, and I found that the black people from there looked down upon me as a black American. They just assumed I was uneducated, and less so than they were. They were prejudiced against me. He said some people are prejudiced against those in law enforcement. He said prejudice goes in every direction. The prayer that has helped me the most and shaped my heart the most toward people the last many years, I've prayed it hundreds, probably thousands of mornings to start my day, is a simple prayer: help me see people the way you see them, God. Help me see people the way you see them. Everyone I encounter, every single person I see, whether it's I see them live or see them on a screen, help me see them as you see them. So this is the first step I would encourage you to make every single day, these 21 days, to go deep and pray this prayer. Help me see people the way you see them. The second step is to go wide. I think most of us tend to think that our experience around race or discrimination or prejudice, that our experience is the universal experience, and I promise you it's not. Our experience is a very narrow experience, and there are others that perhaps are not far away from us who've had very different experiences. This became so clear to me. It was the first time my eyes were really opened through a dear friend. Verna is a black woman who's been a dear friend of Marie's and mine for at least 12 years. And Verna and I had several dialogues, and dialogues ended up speaking about people in law enforcement. And And it was so clear we had such different perspectives, and the more we talked and the more we dug into it over more than one conversation, it began to be clear that I'd had one experience with law enforcement, she'd had a different experience. And my experience was this very beautiful, idealistic experience because my father was in law enforcement. And my father was a man of great upstanding character. My father loved people widely and broadly and deeply. I saw law enforcement through my father's life and the way he lived, the way he worked. And I've known some in law enforcement. I know some now here at the Harbor in law enforcement. And they're much like my dad. That was my very narrow view. Verna and I talked, and Verna heard my view and heard about my father. And she said, you know, I could only wish that every encounter I've had with law enforcement would have been with people like your dad. If that had been the case, I would have a much different view, but that's not the case. Some of my encounters have been very, very different than that. So eye-opening for me. It so broadened my perspective. I so understood her much more deeply, much more clearly, and she understood me much more deeply and more clearly as well. It's important to learn from those around us who might be different than we are in skin color or socioeconomic background, or maybe not being in law enforcement when you and I have never walked in the shoes of a policeman. We need to have that kind of time. We need to ask questions. We need to listen to their story and their perspective. We need to be sure we don't judge or critique their experience. When Marie and I and our boys moved to Friendswood 25 years ago this month, we lived in Friendswood on a street called Hidden Treasure. It was simply a cul-de-sac. We lived there 14 years. We would live there today. We loved it. But all the bedrooms, all the bathrooms were upstairs, and as Marie's parents were aging, we realized the stairs were becoming difficult. We had to find another place to live. But we lived on Hidden Treasure 14 years. When we moved into Hidden Treasure, the family right next to us was an Asian family. The family next to them was a black family. Some time passed, a family moved into the house. On the other side was a Hispanic family. And there were hundreds of times in those years, and even some since, when Marie and I said, we are so thankful to God we live on this block in this cul-de-sac. And we're so thankful that our sons had years being raised on this block. We realized that our lives are so much richer and deeper. We understand a much bigger picture of what's real because we lived for 14 years with a diversity of people around us. At the Harbor, if you're in the minority at the Harbor, if you are black or Hispanic or Native American or Middle Eastern, or I could go down a much longer list than that. If you're in the minority here, we are much the better because you're here. Your experiences of reality have helped shape us, and I pray help shape us all the more, especially now. Your experiences have made us so much better. We understand truth much better because you are here. This is the 21-day challenge around going wide. Sometime in these 21 days, I challenge you to learn from someone whose experience has been different than yours. Over 21 days, find someone and learn from their experience when their experience has been different than yours. So go deep, go wide. The third step is this, is to love always. I was sitting with my friend Kim, and after much discussion, I said, Kim, what do you think matters most? What is the one thing that would matter most in the Harbor and in America today? And Kim thought a long time. And he said, I think love is the key. I think love is the key. It made me think of something I've said many times. Love is the currency of God's kingdom. The currency of a nation is something that those in power choose to say, this is of great value. In God's kingdom, he's chosen to say, of greatest value is love. Love trumps everything. In fact, Paul would write in Romans 13:10, he would say, love fulfills the entire law. He says, if you and I get love right, we will actually carry out the entire law of God. Love trumps everything. One of the most famous stories that Jesus told is that of the Good Samaritan. It's the story of a man who's traveling, and some thieves beat him up and rob him and leave him to die in a ditch. There are a number of people that pass by and look over and see him but continue walking. There's one man that doesn't continue on. There's one man that goes down to him and cares for his wounds and takes him to a place where he can get further care and pays for the further care. And at the very core of this, it's a story of a man who loves across the greatest racial divide of his culture. Because it's a story of a Jewish man who's been badly wounded and a Samaritan man who helps him. In their time, that was the greatest racial divide. A Samaritan to a Jew. This is the story of a man who loves across the greatest racial divide of his culture. Love always means to really see someone, to look in their eyes. It means to speak and extend kindness to them. This is the specific challenge I want to give to you is for 21 days, I want to challenge you to read and practice 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 through 7. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 through 7. These four simple verses to read and practice for 21 days. This is what it says. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstances. The third key, the third step, love always. 21 days, read and live this out. Go deep, go wide, love always. The fourth step is to pray fervently. At the Harbor, one of our 12 core values, it's the core of who we are, says that the work of the church is first and foremost prayer, by which all other work is led, empowered, and supported. And we deeply believe that. Pray fervently daily for 21 days for your heart. Pray this prayer I've already given you. Help me see people as you see them, God. Pray for your heart every day. Pray for the Harbor. Pray for those of us that call the Harbor home, that our hearts will be molded more and more in alignment with the heart of God. Pray that that will become our heart. Pray that we will follow every step God leads us to take in this season of opportunity around discrimination and prejudice. Pray for the church in America. The Harbor is just one tiny local expression of God's church, but he has this massive church that sprawls across every community in America. Pray for the church in America, that we in the church, that our hearts be deeply aligned with the heart of God. Pray for the church in America. Pray for America. Pray that across America, even much beyond the church, that there will be hearts that will be coming more and more in alignment with the heart of God. Pray that we will increasingly find ways to improve upon the legal and judicial system that must protect the innocent. Pray for that. Pray for our leaders, that they will have wisdom and courage. Pray for our leaders that they will have wisdom and courage. They're the ones who will be shaping the legal and judicial system that evolves from this. We have, as I said, in my lifetime, there's been legislation that's been written that could fill a warehouse, and some of it's been good and helpful about discrimination and prejudice, but some of it's not. Looking back through my lifetime, some has been damaging, as a matter of fact, and our leaders, and we must learn from that. I would say to those of us that will be trying to be influencers in this, I would say beware of herd mentality, beware of peer pressure. The loudest voice, the majority voice, isn't always right. If we want to be a voice, study the essentials. And the essentials include looking back over the last many decades at our legislation that we've passed to make things better and see what has worked and see what has not worked. Study the details. Study the essentials. I will close with this. Don't underestimate the power of a heart in alignment with the heart of God. Don't underestimate that. Don't underestimate the ripple effect of one single life who shares God's heart. One single life that tries to see the heart of every single one that they encounter. Every single one who tries to be sure that their own life is freed from prejudice. Every single one who will love always. Don't underestimate the power of a church that's filled with people whose hearts are coming increasingly in alignment with the heart of God. And the ripple effect that a church like this, that has 2,500 people that call this place home, the ripple effect that could come from this church. There should be great hope in this time. Hope that indeed there will be hearts coming in alignment with the heart of God. That there'll be a legal and judicial system that becomes more and more efficient. There should be great hope because God is for us in this great endeavor. God is for us in this great endeavor. He longs to bless this generation. And as he does that, it would be for the benefit of our children and for their children and for their children as well. So I challenge you, if you're in this viewing crowd, to a 21-day challenge. I challenge you to go deep for 21 days to ask God, help me see people the way you see them. I challenge you to go wide sometime in these 21 days. Learn from someone whose experience about life and prejudice and discrimination has been different than yours. For 21 days, love always. 21 days, read and live out 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 through 7. And then finally, for 21 days, to pray fervently for your heart, for the harbor, for the church in America, and for our leaders. Father in heaven, this is our path because it's your path. This is your heart. At this time in our nation, in our country, that there's significant progress of lives coming in alignment with your heart. That more and more, especially in the church, but that would spill out far beyond your church, that hearts are in alignment with your heart. This is your time. This is your time for us to take our legal and judicial system and see where there are places of improvement out of deep wisdom, out of collective effort around unity to find ways and places to improve that. Father, may we look back upon this time. See, this was a defining time in our nation when discrimination took a great fall and prejudice became so much more rare. Father, we pray this with great hope and anticipation. In Jesus' name, amen.